and Zero. We're there.
And hello and good evening, everybody.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all again. We're going to keep the same setting as we had for the Halloween special today, just for fun. And we're going to be talking today all about spirit guides and things like that. So we're using a different mic system. If you hear anything odd, please put a comment and we can always adjust. But it should be all right, I should think, tonight.
Yes.
So we'll take a few hellos from you guys as you come on, and then we're going to talk all about the spirit world, the spirit guides, what they are. Jane and I might have different views about it as well. We might think differently, might think the same about things. We decided not to discuss it beforehand, just to come straight in and have a conversation about it. And of course, we'd love to hear what you think and if you have spirit guides yourself.
Right.
So, hello here coming in from Mandy, Jane. Hello, Craig and Jane. Happy to see you. Lots of love from the Netherlands.
Oh, lots of love to you as well.
Do you want me to read them?
You
Okay.
read them because I can't see my.
Okay, Ava Hamilton saying good evening, Jane and Craig. Nice to see you. They're
Where's
coming
she
in
from?
from Facebook. Doesn't say. We'll just do a few hellos tonight.
Yeah.
Vera Tugwell saying hi from rainy Canada.
Oh, lovely.
Same as England, you see. That's why we all went there, didn't we, to meet the UK. Too much like home. And Agility Bits, who is closer to home, of course, they're in Cornwall, saying hello from mild Cornwall. Good to see you, Pat, and another one of our patrons, of course. And Patricia Schultz as well, who says good evening from Germany.
Good evening, Patricia.
Hi there, Patricia. Good to see you all, and a lot of regular faces again, and I know there's a lot more all piling in to have a chat with us as well, which is really nice. And just before I do start, I would say that I am doing some new videos coming up soon around the seance table, as it were, here with my old circle, and that will be going out on a Wednesday, except it will be on the other channel. It will be on the other channel that you'll find in the description below, because it's going out at the moment as, I suppose, a pilot, because we want to test it out in case we get any blips and things, and make sure it's the sort of thing everybody likes. I'll put a few of them up on this channel as well, but if you have a look in the description below and click the one for the Foundation channel and join that one, follow that one as well. Of course, if you're new here, click and follow this channel. So now we've got that out of the way. Where do we begin with spirit guides?
I think you should take a deep breath and chill out.
So what do you think about spirit guides then?
Well, a lot of it is fantasy that lots of people bring the spirit guides through sheer fantasy, like somebody famous. It doesn't matter if your spirit guide's a bus conductor, Craig, or anybody like that. But usually a spirit guide is destinated to you from the time of birth, conception to the end of time. Your spirit guides can change, can have as many as 2 or 3. And it all depends what you were in previous incarnation. You could have a Chinese guide, a Dawa. You could have an Indian guide, a Sikh, or you could have a Hindu guide. You could have an ordinary English guide, or you could have a guide that's been a doctor, and perhaps somebody's a doctor to guide them in the material world with operations. But usually you're not living and breathing your spirit guides. You can't possibly, because we are very much in the physical world. So usually your guides come and help you. I call your helpers or your controllers. When we're giving a reading, then we tune in and we can find them, that they come to us. There's many people, healers that have guides that work through them, be it a spiritual healer, be it a Reiki healer, or being somebody with good intentions and with a lot of love. And also sometimes we do have a lot of North American Indian guides that come through. But when you have guides, I think it's a good thing to have evidence and proof of that guide. Because as I said before, there's lots of people who have high-fluting, fanciful guides, which really aren't guides. It's people's minds, isn't it, Craig?
Yeah, well, the way I think about it, I think there's different levels of guides, as it were, in many ways. First of all, there's what I would call the guides that come from the unconscious mind. These are not to be poo-pooed because it's still part of this development process of people, but this is what you could perhaps call as like a fantasy guide. But like I say, for example, Carl Jung had his spirit guide, which he considered to be an archetype of the collective unconscious, something that developed, an image that developed in his mind to help guide him inwardly, which in a way was kind of perhaps a bit of a splintered part of himself. So a lot of people, I think, get this and think this is a spirit guide that's independent of us. So that guide can be very useful. It can help with the integration of the self. And sometimes this is what I think comes through in trance mediumship, when people do trance and they have these guides. And I think sometimes this is kind of where it can get a bit dodgy and can sometimes become linked in with fantasies and dreams and things like this. So, like Jane said, we go to another level where we also start thinking about what is a guide and can we prove it? Because this is where it starts to get important, because if a spirit guide can give you some form of evidential proof, then you know it's something that's not coming from the mind.
Yes,
and this is what you were
correct,
saying,
yes.
isn't it? Because if it's coming from the mind, it can be very good. This is where sometimes, I think, for example, people like Dolores Cannon and people like that, I get the feeling that's more channeling something from the unconscious mind. And it's relevant and helpful, and often, I think, got a lot of psychic stuff with it, but also intertwined very much with the person's beliefs. And I think this also applies sometimes to some of the spiritualist guides that come through, Big Red Indians, that sometimes is got no proof that it's anything other than their own mind, isn't it? But then, like Jane said there, we also have to think about, now, if a guide can start giving some proof that it's not just from your mind, then it gets interesting. And I think the first guides that we would get would be the people like our friends and relations that are in the spirit world, wouldn't we, really? They can give proof through other mediums.
Yes, but it depends on your work, what you do here on the earth plane. I mean, so many nurses I've met, and I used to be a nurse, they seem to be quite psychic, some of the nurses and things, and sometimes they might have a guide that is coming to them and telling, quick, go to that room or that cubicle, the person's need help, and she might arrive just on time. There might be a guide of a nurse guide to go and help or resuscitate that patient.
Yeah, I think people look to the idea of, well, who's my spirit guide? One thing, like to have some person in the spirit world that can tell you what to do and help you out and guide you, right? Which can be helpful, but I don't think it comes to the ordinary person. I think the guides come to those people who have a special duty.
Yes,
so,
right.
like when you say about a nurse,
That's right, correct.
Healers will have guides,
Yes,
won't they?
yes.
And I think sometimes people who are, I said we're getting a bit of an echo here, I'm going to move this forward. Sometimes guides that have a special purpose, such as something to do with important things for humanity or something like that, then that person might have a guide, a mentor, a daemon, as they call it. And then mediums do have guides, because they have to have those people helping us on the spirit side, who help us to connect with the spirit world, help us with the particular different issues that might come up and things like that.
You can also have what I call rescue guides. It's like guides that come through that people are trapped between the two worlds and can't accept they've gone over on the other side, and they still want to retain their attachment to the earth plane. So therefore you have a spirit guide that's trying to help that person cross over, so to speak. So a medium would help them with that guide, and they'd work both together with a control.
Yeah. So guides have a very specific purpose and difference. I hope the sound's all right, actually. If Matt's getting any problems with the sound, let us know, because I just worry about that might be getting a loop here. But guides have different purposes depending upon who they're working with, really. Mm-hmm. So like a medium would definitely have lots of guides, would need to. And then also I think that we do kind of also have our own personal helpers on the spirit side. So when we go into deep meditation, perhaps, I often will feel there's a presence with me that tells me things that I need to know. Sometimes it's somebody I recognise. I might recognise it as somebody from the spirit world that I've known, who's lived. Sometimes I recognise it as being somebody that I've learnt to connect with over many years, when I've sat in circle and things like that.
There's an echo in the sound.
Yeah, there is. So that's be all right, though, I think. I don't think we've got any feedback. It does create a sort of Sorry, this is a little bit distracting, this, isn't it, when it's doing this? Let's see if I can get the volume down a little bit, because we're getting a voice on top of a voice.
That's it.
Yep. Hopefully that'll be a bit better. I'll just move it a little bit away from the mic, because I think the mic picks up this stopped. Yeah, that's it. We just need to be a little bit further away from the mic with it. So spirit guides have multiple purposes. They can help with healing, they can help with spirit communication, and they help also specifically mediums with different things. So, as I've said before, I've got humorous guides that work over there. All sorts of unusual figures that come forward and might help find the funny stories.
The purpose of a guide is to help those that are left behind on the earth plane. And your true guides will come to you, and it's a very knowing feeling. It's like you might sit quiet and suddenly you can feel a guide that's influencing you, influence your mind, influence your thoughts and sensitivity. And then it's a very knowing feeling. I mean, as Craig said, we've got many guides. One of my guides is just an ordinary plump grandmother that keeps me in check. And the other one is a Chinese guide who is a Dawa. And I also have nuns that work through me for some reason. But sometimes Craig and I are very blessed that sometimes we have the late Doris Stokes that works through us, don't we, Craig?
Yeah, so like I say, sometimes we get people that we know. Sometimes we get people who we don't know. And we get guides that are there for specific purposes.
Yes.
Like Jane said, for example, a crazy thing, it seems daft, but there's a clown that works with me sometimes and finds all the stories when you're doing a demonstration to an audience. We'll find all the stories about false teeth. And I get all these crazy bits of proof about false teeth. And I'll say to someone, did your grandmother used to cut the apple pie and use the false teeth to make all the crimpling around the edges? He said, she did. How did you know that? As a family joke. And I think, good God, how did that ever happen? Stories, you wouldn't think there's many stories about false teeth, but if there's one out there, that guy would find it. So I think to myself, well, because I used to think, is this something I've developed in my mind, something that's my own fantasy? But when you start getting the proof back like that, it says, I'm going to find the stories of the false teeth. What? And that false teeth stories being given to me, but getting verification. And then you think, well, this is real. Or is it something that I've created as a mental image that goes out and acts on my behalf, like a genie? We never really get to the bottom of it.
And one important thing is people will say, will I actually see my spirit guide materialise in front of me? Sometimes they will show themselves through a psychic art, might be a psychic artist that will do a drawing of your guide. You don't want someone doing stupid drawings like a Sugar Puffs man. And they might give you a name for your spirit guide. And I've had several psychic drawings from the late Coral Polge, absolutely wonderful drawings. And I remember she gave me a drawing of one guide of a lady with auburn hair, and I wasn't conscious of that lady. It wasn't until I showed my mother. She said, yes, that was an aunt of ours that goes right back on the Forsyth family. And I wasn't aware of that. But when you asking, sometimes when you ask, come on, our spirit guides, come and show me this, come and show. They come when they're ready, don't they, Craig?
Yeah, actually, Coral Polge was a fantastic. She used to draw people's guides, but she also used to draw people that passed on that you knew.
Yeah.
One of the people that taught me early days, Bill Landis, used to work with her a lot, and he would connect with the person in the audience, and meanwhile Coral would be drawing the picture, and Bill would start giving the evidence. He wouldn't know what she's drawing, turn around and she's drawn exactly the same things that he's been talking about.
Yes.
And so the spirit in that case is able to work with two people at the same time. So you imagine you'd have to have multiple spirit guides to work with two mediums and then organise it in such a way that the medium can give the message to the audience and the psychic artist can do the drawing. And these were great drawings. She was a very skilled portrait artist. So, you've got proper drawings. Some of the crazy things we've seen.
I think she was trained in St Martin's College, and that's...
Did she?
Yes, she did. She told me, because she invited me round for tea, I can remember, and she was telling me about things, and she was just a down-to-earth lady, and she'll suddenly say, I've got to go and give some clothes to the Salvation Army, just every day talking like that, so natural, so grounded.
I don't think she was St Martin's, but I think she was at a good college, because Royal Academy I think she went to, because St Martin's was not that type of art. maybe. But anyway,
Well, that's what she told me.
I'm not sure
because I knew Tom Johnson, who she's married to.
Okie. All right. Well, I might be wrong there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just
Perhaps
in my
you'd
mind.
like to ask us some questions now, or you can tell us about your spirit guides.
Yeah, we should hopefully see them come up on the screen here in a moment. Good. So Tanya,
the guides have arranged it.
Yeah, well, we've got our own special spirit guide sitting in the control room with Matt there today, who's guiding us in the background. None of it would work without all the behind-the-scenes stuff. Tanya's saying, do we all have a guide? How can I not sense them, know them? Am I too close-minded, maybe?
Well, first of all, Tanya, I've got to say, what do you do?
No, don't. You can't interact because
No.
can't
What
get
I'm
across.
saying, if she's working for spirit and she's a medium or clairvoyant, she would definitely sense it.
Yeah, I think with this, I suppose, I think everybody has a guide up to a point. That there's a guide there in the background that will help you over to the next world, and the spirit helpers that help us into this life, and spirit helpers that help us out. But I don't necessarily think that everybody necessarily has a guide or needs to be in contact with the guide. It depends what you're doing.
That's what I said with your work.
Yeah,
what you're
if
doing.
you're doing, that in that respect, yeah, because like if you're doing your spiritual work of some sort, then I think your guides come close, and when it's necessary, they'd reveal themselves to you. So try and always to get in touch with your spirit guide. It's not strictly that important. I think it does happen much more when you sit in a circle. And like when I get my circle around this table later on, you'll notice when some of these sessions we'll connect with guides and things like that. So it definitely comes close when you sit to develop. But in normal everyday life, I don't think it's as important because the spirit guides are there to help mainly with the spirit world, the connection with the spirit world. You might nonetheless sometimes get messages, but the only thing you really need to do is listen to your unconscious mind. Listen to what I call the conscience. And somewhere, all of us, I think, have an inner voice, something that just is like, we know what to do, a Jiminy Cricket on our shoulder, as it were. And we just listen to that inner voice, and we can usually get the guidance from within. And sometimes the spirit guides are working, but also just the general sense of divinity works through each person, in which we can connect with and feel the right thing to do in the right circumstances. And that's why it's important to trust your gut feelings and trust your gut reaction, and try to make yourself a pure stream to connect with that, and not try to force it and push it in directions that you feel you want it to go, you know. Perhaps another question?
Mm-hmm.
Have any of your spirit guides given you wrong information, says Vera, or do you misunderstand the message?
No, I can honestly say my spirit guides that I work with, it came to me 100%. They've never let me down. They might warn me at times that the person's running late in traffic, held up, or they might tell me beforehand what to expect from that person, and I believe them 100%. I'm not switched on to them 24/7 because my brain wouldn't take it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think sometimes you can misunderstand the message.
Yeah.
I think that is easily possible. Depends how clouded one's mind is. This is why I say you've got to have clarity of vision, really. You've got to be able to open yourself. Like I say, all is clear, only I am clouded. And if we can move those clouds away from our consciousness, then clarity, both of understanding of the nature of existence, but also that connection with the spirit world becomes more clear. And it's a bit like having a lake. You know, they say to describe this often to describe with meditation too, but if the lake is all splashing around, you throw a stone in it and it won't make any difference. But if it is perfectly still, then you throw a little tiny pebble in and you'll see the ripples go across the whole lake. And that's the same with us. If our mind is still, then the spirit world can drop those little stones in, which are extra thoughts that they're putting to us, and we can see it more clearly.
Now, for example, Chinese spirit guides usually come in with wisdom, because Chinese people, a lot of them are very superstitious. So if you have a Chinese guide that comes in holding a pearl, wisdom, jade, good fortune, and as I say, they do things on numbers and they give you proof. One Chinese guide, only one I have, just comes through to Chinese people that come for a consultation with me, and they might just be with me about 5 minutes at the most, and they give clarity to that person and tell them everything like that. Then they just go, and then I just see that so clearly. And it depends on the vibration of your guides as well. And I think it's very important. Craig will explain. We've seen many people, and they've all said the spirit guides, for example, and Berlin, haven't we, Craig?
Yeah, we get some crackpot stuff. I mean, you do. I mean, and you get it in spiritualist churches, you know, and people will come up to you and say, "Oh, I know your spirit guide. It's so and so," and you start describing Zulus and all sorts of things. I think, oh, yeah. I saw your guide stood with you and that, and I think, you know, this guy's just projecting fantasies at us, and this is where you've got to be so careful, and that's why, you know, with all this type of work, you've got to try to keep your feet square on the ground if you can, because we are dealing with things that sound crackpot. But actually, some of it can be proved, and we've got to try to prove it all the time. This is why I'm always so keen with all forms of mediumship that we must give verification, whether it's a mediumistic message or even a psychic type of message. You know, I see psychics dive in and start telling someone, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, but they've not told you anything to establish that they're connected with you. They know all about your life, they know about you, they know about things that have happened already before they can tell you things that they see could potentially happen in the future. And it's the same with spirit communication. You can't read a spirit from the cards and things like that. You have to give proof. You have to give names if you can get them, not always, but you must be able to give a good solid description of the character of the person, the main events that may have happened in their life. Their passing illnesses is important, and other information that will all be given. And that's what the guides are trying to feed you, and that's the important thing. Is it's all about, in terms of mediumship, certainly about proof, evidence that must be verified. Otherwise, it could be anything, you know, it could be anything whatsoever. How can we prove it?
Well, it's like when my spirit guides come to me, when we were doing television on the Big Breakfast, as you know, we had to do Tomorrow's News Today, and I used to go into a deep meditation into my spiritual room, and then I would hear one of my spirit guides say, this will happen, that will happen. I said, are you absolutely 100% sure? Because I'm putting my head on the block here, and I trusted them so much, and of course these things did happen exactly as they said it. Yeah,
actually, we were on next week's News Today, weren't we? Yeah. We called it that in the end, but on Big Breakfast, and you know, you're going. It's okay doing it on a YouTube channel because it doesn't seem quite so bad. But when you're going on with a whole set with all the people and you've only got a few seconds to put your points across, you want to make sure you get it right. I mean, we were really tested in the fires.
We had a scoreboard, what was pending, what was right, what was wrong. And I think they were amazed because they thought it was going to be quite clever having psychics tell what the news is going to happen before it happened. And of course, our predictions come up. And they kept us on the show for one whole year.
Yeah, they thought it was going to be a week or so, and they thought it was going to be a bit of a laugh, and we'll tear these psychics back. You know, we'll have them on next week. They'll see what comes true. And of course, it all came true. We got most of it, didn't we? 90% of it. And then the other stuff came up later. So we said, why don't you put a pending board? Because that's coming up next week. We missed it. Because as you know, the timing things is very difficult. So, God, what a way to be tested, though, wasn't it? And again, that's when you're demanding from the spirit guys, give me the answer, I need it. That's, you know. Right. And actually, it's a bit like that. Actually, when you do spirit communication generally, with mediumship, you have to boss them around a bit on the spirit side. Actually, you can't just sit there and let it happen. You know, sit passively. You've got to say, come on, tell them. This is your opportunity to give your communication to your loved one here. What's your name? Give it to me. Yes, and you have to almost boss the spirit around. And I think part of this,
if the need is great, then spirit will come, and spirit will give you the proof, Craig.
Yeah. So the guides are the ones that help make all this communication possible, certainly from a medium's point of view. Okay, so perhaps Matt's got another question. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I've missed this one. Sorry, Kathy says.
He's talking too much.
I'm too busy talking. Yeah. Kathy says, can you communicate better if you meditate before communicating with your spirit guide?
Well, most mediums do go into a deep meditation. We have to have stillness and quietness. So we have to have non-attachment to the outside world and go in what I call an inner view of ourselves. And we're on quite a high vibration when these things come to us. And then you have the person or you're a spirit guide, because a lot of people are testing and saying, all right, tell us, what's the favourite colour of my loved one? And that. And suddenly you might see a colour flash across your mind and you might say blue, and that's our spirit communicator that's helping us. That's right, isn't it, Craig?
Yeah, I think it's very, very important, meditation, not just for stilling the mind, because that's obviously, like I described with that pool, it's critical. But when we go into a meditation, it's a bit like when a person goes into sleep or is in a good state of mind, our waves of our brain change. So most of the time, in normal waking consciousness, we're in what they call we call in beta waves, which is sort of general mind chatter. When the stillness of meditation comes, we get into the alpha waves, and then sometimes we get into the very, very deep waves, which are normally you're only aware of in deep sleep, like the theta and delta waves of the brain and so forth. So I think what happens is when we do the meditation, we get our brain firing on a different sort of frequency. And then we bring it out of the meditation and we bring it with us into the world before we do the spirit communication. And the same thing works when we are communicating with the spirit guides. I think we have to raise our vibration to them and they lower their vibration to us. And this happens to spirit communication generally. So that the two, we're trying to raise ours up, they bring theirs down, and then the two start to meet. And that's how we get the communication. Yes. So like Jane said, she says it calls it like we go into the inner world, we go into our zone.
Inner view.
Inner view, as Sharavana calls it. And I think this helps us to connect. And that's why, if someone stops me on the street and says, "Oh, great, tell me about this and that," I'm in beta consciousness, so I can't hear it.
Sharavana that said it. It was me that said it.
Oh yeah, but his book's called that.
You didn't tell me that. It's me.
That's all right.
Right, so another one.
So, can we put another one up? Do you have any examples of guide going to great lengths to influence you to do or perhaps not do a certain thing? Well, that's a good one, Christina. It's an interesting question. I don't know if I can answer it though. I'd have to think.
Keep thinking,
being pushed by a guide. I suppose you could say it's like when something's prompting you. And you get a feeling you've got to do something, and you have an urge to do things that you really want to do. A bit like here, this is something I feel we've been prompted to do since we started. And I often think the things you actually do in life, often if you're on a spiritual path, the spirit world will find some way to get it all fitted in so it comes in useful. So I'd spent a lot of time early on in graphic design. It became very useful when the internet came along, and it became very useful when it came to, and that from that learning to do editing, for example, for the programs and things. So I think we're always being prompted, and I think the spirit guides are part of that prompting process. And we've got to trust and follow our inner promptings. Because if we ignore it and we just go on with the superficial things in life, then we're missing a great deal. And I think that's how I would say it would come in. You, Jane, have you had anything that's prompted you from, like, you would perhaps connect it with a spirit guide or just an inner prompting?
Well, sometimes I've had spirit guides come to me when I've been trying to cook supper, and I've had to turn around and say, "Shove off," in a nice way. And then the phone's rang, and it's somebody in distress. It could be they've lost a son, which has happened recently to someone, and I can't ignore it. So you get this feeling that the spirit guide's really pushing you and giving you what I call an earthly shake.
Yeah. I think we are. I've always felt in my life, I suppose I feel like I've been driven. It's something that's driven me along, and it's like something that you've got to do. And like, really, doing mediumship, I didn't really want to be a medium. My life was geared up, first of all, towards art. I was just mad keen on art. I was accepted into top art college and all the rest of it. And I exhibited and did it and lived and breathed it. But something pushed me away from that. It's like I used to hear the sound of my guides talking to me when I was painting. I used to think it was the muse, except they start talking back and telling me other things. But I found that eventually there was no way I was going to resist in the end. Even if I didn't want to, I was going to be a medium, whether I liked it or not.
It was Dorian Gray.
Yeah, it was
Dorian
kind
Gray.
of thing. Yeah.
Do you remember Dorian Gray?
Yeah,
What
it was
happened
good,
to
a bit
him
like this
painting?
set. But I mean, so in a way, I think, you know, if you're going to be a medium, you're kind of destined to it, really. And
Yes.
you don't have to do it. You know you can resist it if you want to. But it's something that pulls you. It's a calling, isn't it? It's a calling, and it can be quite hard, I think,
I
sometimes.
think most mediums, they've had suffered. They've been stripped of everything to start again, but that's good groundwork, because if you suffered, then you've got compassion in your heart to reach out and help others, and you must keep your feet firmly on the ground, because sometimes people see kindness as a weakness, but it's what I'm calling you being tested on the earth plane, and your spirit guides are very important to make sure you're on a good path with good values.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. I think every medium I know, including us, we know our lives. But I think you have to go through some of the worst possible things you can imagine. And I think healers tend to go some of the worst physical illnesses and things like that in order to develop their healing powers. Or sometimes a real crisis experience can cause, it's like a near-death experience, you know, which we're going to have on next week. We've got someone going to bring on as a guest next week, we hope, to talk about near-death experiences.
Next week we've got a fabulous collage artist and her husband, and they will be talking their experiences. I won't give anything away because I feel it's a must, you must watch. And she's quite a gifted person, and this person has suffered a lot, and thank God she's still alive today to tell her story to us all.
Yeah, I think it should prove interesting. It's an interesting experience.
So tune
I think.
in.
Yeah, so keep following the channel. Click that button, click that bell, and follow our channel, as we endlessly all have to say on YouTube. If you haven't done it by now, do click that bell, because you don't have to keep searching for us all the time. So let's have another look at another question back, perhaps, if we got one. So here we are. Thank you, Matt, for all the work you're doing in the background, by the way. Frank Quinn is saying, where are the guides for people that do bad and wicked things? Why can't they influence them?
Well, I would answer that we're all got our own free will, and it's not necessary the guides, because then you might be talking about demonic forces, or like the Catholic Church would say, like evil things that is doing all these things, and that's not necessarily true. People use their own free will. Nobody's born an evil person. They make choices, and as I say, you go on the right path or the wrong path. So a guide could come to you in your subconscious mind telling you not to do it, and you're going to think to yourself, I am going to do it. So you've used your own free will.
Yeah, and actually, even the wicked have had their guides. For example, Adolf Hitler, who's an interesting one always with these things, really did believe in the occult and believed he was the incarnation of an ancient witch. And so did most of all the people in the Nazi party close to him. And they believed they were calling upon evil spirits that would help them. And in fact, they used to even have their own seances. I mean, Hitler used to have...
He had his own astrologer.
He had his own, but he also had his own mediums. And so everything in life can be used and misused. How can we, even in this world, it's very hard to influence someone that's hardened in their wickedness. But all souls ultimately have to find their own redemption. We have to, the Buddha said, seek out your own salvation. Ultimately, we have to become our own guide, our own helper, our own person that actually makes the decisions that this is the right thing to do. But meanwhile, perhaps we do need other guidance, and I don't know if the subtle world of the spirit can often get through to people that are on a very blinkered path, sort of on a path that, you know, a person that's taken a path, say, of being a drunk, would very hard to be able to communicate with the subtleties of the spirit world. So they can't get through, basically. And I think those of us that are trying hard, and hopefully people watching this are trying hard to become a more spiritual person, I think the spirit connections will become much more natural and spontaneous even. So perhaps another question?
Yes, perhaps.
Matt frantically has to go through them all.
See.
Can spirit guides help you find the places where you lived in a past life? If so, do they provide some kind of proof?
Well, I think for a start, you have to do all that research. They can influence you so much. They can't say, right, in a past life, only the Nadi Oracle can do that. In a past life, you were so and so and so and so. But you might have a feeling that you've been somewhere, and you might have had a feeling that you were somebody else in a past life, and perhaps your spirit guide will show you a direction towards that. And then you have to work the rest out for yourself, because life's not easy here, is it? We can't click our fingers and demand things from the spirit world.
Yeah, and of course then there's also the possibility actually that some of those spirit guides that are working with you might have been with you in your previous
Absolutely,
lives.
Craig, that's right.
And therefore you may have had a life with them. They may have been a teacher to you in the past. You may have been friends with them in the past. And I think always all things are interconnected, and so there must be some spiritual link that was there before we came to this earth, I feel.
And I think some spirit guides, if you're a very spiritual person, will put you in touch with other spiritual persons, perhaps avatars, sages, masters, and that's your destiny, because you must have earned that from previous incarnation to be in front of a holy person.
Yeah, and a lot of mediums say within spiritualism that your guides will change through your life. That at certain stages in your life, for example, when you're at the beginning stages of developing mediumship, you might have a certain number of guides that are working with you for the development of your spiritual powers. And then at other stages, you may have guides that come because you've now specialised, and you might be now a trance medium and need different types of guides, or you might become a healer, or you might become an inspirational speaker, or you might whatever sort of the gifts of spirit that come to you, and whatever your inclination is also to what's most suited to you. You may have specific guides. For example, we talked about Coral Polge there. She would have had guides that would have helped her, who would have had an understanding of art. There was other artists that have other psychics and mediums that have, for example, been able to channel great composers, for example, or great writers. They would have had other spirit guides working with them. So I think they're kind of there to help you specifically with what your path has become.
And it's just an interesting thought that came to me. Perhaps, Mozart might have had savants, and he might have had a spirit guide with savants and influence, and children can influence, spirit guides can influence children, other children that have attachment to people on the earth.
Yeah, and a lot of famous people have claimed to have guides with them. So, for example, you say that Liberace used to believe that he had the spirit of Franz Liszt, the great pianist,
he
working
used to
with
pray
him.
to St. Anthony.
And he believed St. Anthony came to him in the hospital when
Yes,
he was
St.
ill,
Anthony.
and things like that. And Michael Jackson believed that he had Liberace working with him, I think he
Michael
said.
Jackson was a Jehovah's Witness, Craig.
Yeah, but no, he claimed to have spirit influences around him, and so did Rachmaninoff. He was another great pianist who believed he was guided by other spirits. Yeah. And Mozart, where did his genius come from? And that's just a few musicians, including modern pop musicians, have often pop musicians, that sounds old-fashioned, have said they play.
Elvis Presley was very much felt he was guided by his twin brother, because he had a twin brother, didn't he?
Oh yeah, yes.
And he
wrote about that.
He felt his brother was guiding him to his music, because Elvis Presley, they came from a very poor family, and he loved the music of gospel music, and so that's where his influence come from, and he worked his way up into music industry.
And I think there's a very strong correlation between spiritual sort of ways and being mediumistic and psychic and creativity.
Yes.
Very often people who are psychics or mediums and claim to be psychics and mediums usually come from an artistic type of background.
That's true.
And so therefore I think there is very much a connection with the same type of intuitive thinking of, when you're an artist, you have to kind of get an idea. Where does that idea come from? So it kind of just given to you. Sometimes you just get an idea. You don't think a thing through. You don't use logic to get a great idea. An idea just pops into your head, oven ready. And I think it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same as what happens with mediumship. It's like, I don't think, this person's got to be this, going to be that, going to be that, going to be that. No, it just pops in. You just know. You just know, and that's it. You know the answer. And it's the same. This is why I think this idea of being creative and also being in touch with the spirit world is very much there, and why many of the great artists and musicians and writers and speakers have often claimed that they get inspiration from a divine realm. Even some scientists actually have had strong influences from things like dreams and things given spontaneously. Right, so we didn't actually say where the place is, but okay. Do you think quantum physics has something to do with how you communicate with the spirit world?
I think quantum physics are very important, and protons very much so, because a lot of physics believe that it's all connected with the spirit realm. Do you remember I had a professor once sent a great big book like that, and all his theory and everything like that, because there's lots of things we don't quite understand. We know there's other planets in the solar system, and we know there is other life forms on other planets, and it's proving all that, because people keep thinking like aliens all the time, but that's not what it is.
I think there's a very strong connection with the idea of quantum. I mean, we don't know where consciousness comes from. We don't know, is consciousness measurable? I mean, I know that I've probably got more consciousness than an ant. Jane might disagree, but there's a certain amount of consciousness. It obviously has a quantity to it. So does it have a mass? Does it have a form? And is it perhaps that consciousness comes from another realm, which is somewhere outside of the body? Because if I'm just communicating with spirit worlds and things like that, where is it? What is it? And could it be the quantum sort of worlds? And also some of the strange things that are there in the quantum field, such as you know, time
Atoms,
is different, and being in multiple places at the same time, and things like this are all possible within the quantum realms. So it's very, very similar to what we describe as the spirit world. But I'm sure a lot of physicists wouldn't like us to start calling the quantum world the spirit world. But in many ways, they are much the same thing. And I think hopefully one day science and spirituality will come together and not see themselves as opposites, but as seeing two sides of the same coin. So there we go. That was interesting. Alexandra.
I love the way you praise yourself.
No, I thought it was an interesting question. An interesting train of thought, even. But I will praise myself. I will praise myself. Alexandra Day says, could our spirit guides be actually people who guide us in our physical lives? Well, that's interesting. So what I think she's saying there is, could some of the actual guides manifest in our life? I don't know if you're thinking, Alexandra, these are kind of like angelic people that have come into our lives and are not real, or in the sense that we would call them real, or maybe even spirit people that manifest in our life. Which is an interesting
Well, perhaps we have got earth angels that's walking around on God's earth.
It's a thing we can't prove one way or the other, isn't it? And it's like it goes into the realms of conspiracy theories and things. When there's no way of answering it, we fill it in with all sorts of imagination. So we can't really answer it, can we? Really? Who knows? I might be the only person that exists in the universe, and everything else is a complete illusion.
Shall we find out, Craig?
Well, actually, it's all just a picture in my brain, and what you're seeing is all just a picture in your brain.
An illusion.
And the people that are watching here, we're just a picture in your brain, a very handsome picture in your brain, I would say, but just a picture in your brain.
Wipe that off.
So when you think about it, this is all you're seeing, and the whole world's upside down too, isn't it? Really, because it's just the eyes are turning it around.
They think the world is an illusion,
so,
don't they?
Yeah, nothing is real. So, you know, who knows? But I think sometimes, but with Alexandra's question there a bit too, often people will say to you, without even realising it, they'll say the right thing at the right moment, Absolutely. At the right time. And I'm sure divinity works through the people around us. And sometimes it's almost like a spiritual paranoia, I suppose you could call it, couldn't you? Because it's like someone says the right thing. I mean, the ancient Greeks, one of their forms of fortune telling used to be to sit in the marketplace on the steps of the temple and just listen. Ask a question, and the first thing that you overheard was the answer to your question.
I think you've got that. I think that's happened to you when you're thinking food and then
suddenly it appears, suddenly dinner's ready, and I will it to me. That's the important thing. That was an interesting question, Alexandra. Thank you. That's some interesting, thoughtful questions tonight, guys. Thank you very much. Brian Carlson says, apparently the guides, in apostrophes, are not watching us 24/7. Folks experiencing a near-death experience report that the first thing they hear is, "What are you doing here?" Both are surprised. Interesting thought.
Yes. I'm sure spirit guides do help the loved ones on the other side when they come to take that soul over on the other side. I'm sure the guides are with them, and it's a beautiful thing really to actually see your loved ones and the guide make sure those conditions are right, because I think what most people fear is how they're going to die, especially some people die alone or in hospital or tragic circumstances, and we can't change those things because that destiny is all karmic actions, of course.
Yeah, in a way, I think what you're saying there really is that the guides come close to us at the alarm bells ring.
Yes.
And I certainly don't think spirit guides would be around you all the time. It'd be a real boring time for them. If time is probably different in the spirit world anyway.
Your brain wouldn't take it, would it?
I think they connect when we connect with them. It's goes like, bing, a message has come in. Oh, Craig's just tuned in and meditated.
Who needs
James
Alexa?
just tuned in and meditated.
Who needs Alexa?
You mustn't say the word Alexa because all your devices will be going off simultaneously. So I think the spirit world do kind of connect with us, don't they? And they come at the right time. So yeah, I think you're right, Brian. Perhaps they are surprised. Some of those reports of near-death experiences very interesting, aren't they? The way they describe these things, fascinating.
Another question?
Yeah. I don't think I can answer any more on that, but well done, Matt. You found another one. Could one feel depressed when one spirit guides leave you till you get used to another? I think Marianne's saying here about perhaps when picking up on that question I was saying about our guides change through life. I think that would imply that there's a lot of attachment between us and the spirit guides. And I think on a very high spiritual level, there's no real attachment like that, or there shouldn't be. I mean, when we're with a highly spiritual person, it's sad to leave them because it's nice to be with them, but you don't weep for it, do you? Because you know it's always going to connect again.
Yes.
And I think that would be. I don't think there would be any form of depressed feelings or whatever, because it. I always think the spiritual realm, the connection, although it be of love, it's not necessarily like emotional love. It's more like something higher than that. It's a compassionate type of love. It's a connection with
it's like
vibration.
All being as one.
Yeah, and that's true, of course,
all being
too.
As one.
Yeah, because obviously, we realise, I think the spirit guides, if they're a high level spirit guide, understand that all existence is one consciousness.
That's right.
And of course that brings another point up too, is that not necessarily all the spirit guides are necessarily highly evolved or enlightened beings, because I think there's many different. For example, I might get messages from my granddad, for example, and he would never call himself a highly evolved, enlightened being, but he cares enough about me to want to give me the right message at the right time. And I think it's the same with our work ultimately, and even a highly involved spirit guide is not going to necessarily going to be able to enlighten you more than another, because like I say, work out your own salvation, as the Buddha says. We have to do it for ourselves ultimately. So we can't be turning to the spirit guides saying, "Oh, do it all for me, solve all the problems in my life, sort it all out, make me enlightened." No, it's not going to work. We have to do the work. In fact, when we do go on the spiritual path, as Jane was saying earlier, the path of suffering opens up for you, because you have to learn empathy. You're not going to be much good talking to someone, helping someone in a distressed situation if you haven't been there a bit yourself. And I think that has to come as part of the spiritual development.
And the more you learn, the more you grow, and you go past your consciousness and descending masters, and I think it goes higher to the Christ consciousness.
Yeah, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's definitely higher levels of consciousness there, and that's what the whole process is about. And I think the spirit guides are mainly there as facilitators, I suppose, helping to make things happen when we're doing the work with the spirit, so that we don't get confused and lost. And it's fascinating when you read some of the history of spiritualism, the connections that have been made with spirit guides. And remember, often some of those spirit guides would actually physically materialize in the spiritual circles and sit in the chair and speak to us. I mean, amazing things. So an awful lot of interesting information is there, and most of it's not on the internet. Most of it actually requires actually doing some work and reading some real books, which mine are always there too, which you can buy for your Christmas presents.
You just wait when mine comes out. It'll be a bestseller, Craig. It'll beat Prince Harry.
Yeah. Okay, perhaps we've got another question. Classical homeopath Ingrid Schultz is saying, I was promoted by my guides to leave Nepal when I was working with a rescue team in 2015. The same day, a second earthquake, my room collapsed. I listened to my guides and left on time.
Good. That's
fascinating one, isn't it? And I think we do get prompts like that. And I remember the same thing happened to me when I was in Israel. And I wasn't sure whether to leave or not. And I was feeling a need that I should leave. And I cast the I Ching. Now the I Ching can also, when you use it over many, many years, it becomes like its own person. It becomes like a person to you. It becomes like a guide. And it develops a special energy that is almost like I see it, like a spirit guide itself. Like perhaps it's like a tulpa. I cast the Ching and it said, he crosses the great water and thunder breaks behind him.
That's never a truer word.
Yeah, not that sort of thunder. But as I left Israel, I prompted me, I thought I'd book a ticket, I went immediately. And as I left, the kibbutz behind me was bombed.
Gosh,
and some of the people I knew there were killed. And they're all hiding in the air raid shelters. So if I hadn't left, I'd have been tied up in that. And it was an unexpected attack. Just like you, Ingrid, I listened to the spirit, listen to the Ching in my case, listen to your spirit guides. It pays, and it pays to listen to your intuition genuinely. I think it knows much, much more than you think. Righty-ho, agility bits of all people. Yes, I think my grandmother is with me. My dog has been looking up the stairs where she actually appears. The dog looks a bit surprised.
Well, perhaps the grandmother's a bit surprised too, is the dog. No, but animals, the perceptions are quite heightened, and they do pick up things, sound, and they will see things like this, because sometimes you see a dog looking up and you think, what's that dog looking up? And they can actually see an aura, or they can actually see that person on the other side. And I think animals are quite good judge of characters and that, because they pick up the senses of people. I mean, it's been known for animals to sniff out cancers on some human bodies and things and try to help them. Animals are incredible creatures, I think. And I often wonder, do animals have spirit animal guides, Craig?
Yeah, do they? Because a lot of people believe that they have spirit guides that are animals. I don't see why that couldn't be the case as well. Certainly, a lot of these things come from totem animals that people have. For example, North American Indians would have talked about that. South America, all those sort of cultures believe in animal guides and things like that. And I remember that woman that used to say, I've got a wolf guide, didn't she?
She was nutty, yeah.
She was nutty as a fruitcake. But I think within reason, I think we can even feel sometimes that there's a special animal connection, perhaps. But I think probably less so when we live in more modern societies, because we don't require that so much. I think if we're living in a very natural nature setting, you would perhaps call upon the spirits of other animals and other beings to help you with that.
Well, there's nature spirits.
That's what I say. You would call upon the nature spirits, and maybe the guides like that there.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as we don't go off into crackpot land, we're running quite low on time now, so we're going to probably come up with the last question now. But just before I do, let me remind everybody. We are here in this lovely little set, and it's all thanks to you, thanks to the patrons particularly. And if you become a patron, it helps us to keep this all going. Jane and I have given our time. Can you give a little tiny bit of money to help this whole thing work? You only need to give a few dollars. It's a $3, I think, the lowest patrons tier. And also I put extra information on there. We do our little Zoom sessions with the patrons from time to time. You can interact with me on there and through the comments and ask questions and prompt us to do different videos and things. Become a patron. Have a look in the description of this video below if you're on YouTube now, and just click that link and have a look and become a patron. It's a little bit per month. It's less than a magazine, but enough if you do it means we can keep this going and we can take it further. And as you know, Jane and I are trying hard also to get a spiritual centre together. But we need the small amounts. It's many drops that make an ocean. So we need your help. If you're watching us every week, have a think. I enjoy Craig and Jane. It's worth putting a little bit. Look how much you spend on Netflix. A little bit to us is tremendous help to help us keep all this going. So one last question, I think, shall we now? Do we have family spirit guides?
Well, it depends from your previous incarnation, doesn't it? Where you're talking about family, you could go back a couple of 100 years through generations. It depends on your earthly life and past life, and you can do that. All things are possible.
Yeah, well, I think you mean family, not familiar spirits, which is another thing that the Christians talk about.
No, I wasn't talking about familiar spirits.
No, that's just the way she spelt it. I think it's a misspelling. Right. But there's also familiar spirits that the Christians talk about, which is spirit guides that pretend, demons that pretend to be spirit guides, and demons that pretend to be your loved ones, which is a load of cotton and nonsense, because why would they help people so tremendously to transform their lives into something spiritual and even actually bring people I know back into their Christian faith? So I think it's, but I certainly think, my voice has gone, I certainly think that we do have family people help us, and that is probably the best way to connect with your guides. Actually, if you've got someone over there, a granddad or a grandma or your mum or someone that you've lost, connect with them, because there's already the strong bond of love, and they might not be enlightened beings, but they give you and they care enough to help prompt you on your path, if that's what you're looking for. If you're looking for ordinary help in the ordinary world, connect with your family spirits. If you're looking to help others, to develop your spirituality, to help others, because that has got to be for others, not for just yourself, then connect with the higher guides, and they will help you to develop your gifts, knowing all the time that it's a path of suffering that you may be taking when you do that. So, shall we just say our final bye-byes now?
I think we better. We've got a few minutes.
We've got a few minutes just to say bye-bye and just have a little chat as we say goodbye to a few people. So, yes, because I think we're on those. My watch goes a bit funny sometimes, but I think we're right here today. So I enjoyed that talk, didn't you?
Yes,
it was quite
and thank you very much
topic.
for joining us. We enjoyed it tremendously. And I have a YouTube channel. I shall go on there next week, because I really haven't had the time this week. And that's Psychic Medium Jane Hamilton Parker.
There's a link in the description below, of course, which we always put up.
But I give you a reminder, of
but
course.
But a good one to remind them. And don't forget, I remember I mentioned at the beginning too, we've got another channel as well for the foundation itself. It's also in the description below. So you can watch the pilot that we're doing for the live seances that will be here in this room here. It won't be on this channel, it'll be on our other channel. It's a smaller channel, but we just thought we'd start with a few people, because it might not be everybody's cup of tea, so it'll be quite long sessions, I expect. Anyway, Vera Tugwell is saying thank you, have a lovely evening, see you next week.
Thank you, Vera.
And we also have Christina, who's been around, and thank you, Christina, who's also been helping us in the background as well. Thank you. Thank you for a great discussion. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you. And I think we ought to tell people we're off to see Sharavana Baba tomorrow,
yeah,
so we have to
we're
leave at 6 o'clock
up
in the morning.
Yeah, up to London. He's in the UK at the moment. Anybody that's read my book, Be Happy, which you should go and buy. He's here at the moment, and you can get to see him. You can get to see him. And Marion Mensky saying, you are both wonderful.
Aren't we just?
It took Matt a while to find that one. It took Matt to find it because he got all the bad ones saying what a lot of rubbish this is. But thank you for joining us this evening. And Janet McClure, thank you, Craig and Jane.
Thank you, Janet.
And we'll just say one more goodbye, I think. Thank you both. Take care, says Lisa Keller.
Thank you, Lisa.
So that's it, folks. That's all for now, folks. We'll see you soon. Thank you for joining us. Bye for now.